Competitive advantage is such a key factor for a business's success, and it seems to be shifting. Can you help me understand the shift?
A business usually gains an advantage over its competitors by choosing a part or parts of a product's or service's value chain, such as design, cost, distribution channels, ease of use, quality, and so on, to be the company's core competency. This core competency becomes the company's focus of intense innovation, which is not easy to replicate by its competitors. In the traditional manufacturing economy, which was all about developing, producing, and selling products, the cost of the land, facilities, and equipment were often so prohibitively high that it represented a pretty good barrier to entry or a competitive advantage against would-be competitors. The information economy, on the other hand, saw the meteoric rise of services, especially relatively new industries like consulting, executive recruiting, and all sorts of alternatives to our dysfunctional healthcare system. These industries required well-educated and trained knowledge workers with the ability to learn and grow, handle lots of data, and be comfortable with the increasing sophistication of computer and IT networks. Formerly manual processes were automated, and far fewer people were needed to complete these tasks. Suddenly, hiring the best and the brightest became an important competitive advantage. The more you knew about the world, your competitors, your consumers, the more successful you'd be. Or at least you'd be able to stay ahead of your competition.
Can you explain to me the difference between a knowledge worker and an experience worker?
Industrial age employees were valued for their engineering know-how and the stamina needed to work long hours on assembly lines, at construction sites, etc. During the 60s and early 70s, we moved from a manufacturing-driven economy to a more services and information-driven economy. This was caused in large part by the computer revolution, which started after World War II, but really took off in the late 70s, when computers became cheaper, less bulky, and easier to use. By the end of the 90s, when the internet had grown into a global phenomenon, reliable and useful information became cheap, often even free, and a lot easier to get. Data had turned into a commodity. That pressure on prices required that once resource-intensive data research and analysis be done as cost-effectively as possible with minimal loss of quality. That work, as well as a lot of basic IT systems functions, were outsourced to low-cost countries, primarily India. In both the industrial age and the information age, businessmen and women were for the most part trained in the disciplines of logic and reason, and were more comfortable engaging the left side of the brain than the more creative and emotional right side. As we enter the experience economy, another big shift is happening. Consumers are now looking for something more than just great products and services. In most industry, that means developing unique experiences. For example, bricks and mortar retailers are finding innovative ways to provide an ideal and unique shopping experience for their customers. This can include everything from offering excellent and empathic customer service to setting up terminals in-store that help customers not only find, but even create their own product or service. It also includes technology-enabled quick and hassle-free checkout to designing more theatrical store interiors. For healthcare providers, it means reducing the anxiety and the fear that naturally occurs when patients visit doctors and hospitals. Many providers have engineered complicated processes to reduce patients' waiting time while providing them online access to their personal medical information and ensuring that patient areas are orderly, attractive, and well lit. The experience economy, however, is all about touching people on a more personal and deeper level. And experienced workers need to be able to easily access the right part of the brain. This allows them to tap into creativity, nonlinear thinking, fun, imagination, and sometimes even chaos needed to come up with ideas for businesses that will offer consumers unique and compelling experiences in the broadest sense of the word and can be monetized. It is creative and original ideas and not necessarily products or knowledge that provide B2C and B2B consumers unique and wonderful experiences that form the basis of a whole new kind of competitive advantage.
Can you tell me how you would hire, train, and retrain that experienced worker?
For those of us who grew up in the more structured information age, the most important part is understanding the value of employees who are, shall we say, less structured. My generation complains that millennials don't work hard, aren't reliable, and not very loyal. That's not a particularly enlightened view. Millennials are simply responding to the need for different skill sets. That's all. They work hard, just differently. They are very reliable, but the 9-to-5 routine doesn't lend itself very well for coming up with original ideas and concepts. Frankly, baby boomers aren't really willing to teach and guide and lead the generation currently entering the workforce the way it should be. When that doesn't happen, millennials are happy to just move on to situations better suited to them. You would too. Companies are actively rethinking how they recruit smart and hardworking employees and develop them into experienced workers. Many academic institutions, which are still the primary places employers go to recruit young talent, have been changing their curriculum to better prepare their students for the new reality of today's business world. Unfortunately, there is a myth that has sprung up that a college degree is not always necessary to be successful in this economy. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Mark Zuckerberg may not have finished their college degrees, but 99% of the rest of us are not as gifted, lucky, or as focused as these men and should get at least a bachelor's degree. Many of the traditional in-house training and development programs are also proving to be less effective if you look at the outcomes of most of these programs. Mentoring and coaching is a far better way to train employees who have been brought up by adults who act more like coaches than teachers or parents. Millennials do best when they develop a deep relationship with an older professional they can trust who listens and responds to what their mentees need, as opposed to throwing a bunch of stuff at them which they're expected to digest on their own. Finally, there is the issue of retention. This is where culture comes in. You may not have football and ping pong tables, free beer, and video games to retain your best employees, but leadership needs to have a values-driven culture that rewards success.
Has one of your clients gone through this? And if they have, can you give me an example?
I'm working with a hospital that is one of the few left in New York City that is not part of a larger hospital system. Until recently, this hospital was understandably focused on medicine, the doctors, teaching residents, and serving the community. This is all very laudable, except they are caught in the current maelstrom known as the U.S. healthcare system. There is currently an oversupply of traditional institutions like hospitals, doctors' clinics, and insurance companies that are no longer adding the kind of value they may have once done. That's due in part to advances in medicine, but also the increased use of the internet and other digital technology that makes a visit to a doctor and long stays at a hospital increasingly unnecessary. My client was brought in from the outside to be the hospital's new CEO with the mandate to save as much of the institution and its legacy as possible. Paradoxically, that required him to be highly disruptive, and so he quickly made the decision to upgrade the quality of the patient experience by putting the patient at the center of everything they were doing. He basically said, everything you do, doctors, nurses, administrators, has to be in the service of giving patients the best experience possible. Free them from anxiety. Let them know that they're being taken care of so they don't feel suddenly left hanging without knowing what's going on. That was a major switch for professionals who were all about the medicine and not always about the patient, and not everybody was able to adjust. Some senior executives and physicians were let go, and others who understood that providing a good customer experience is key to the livelihood of any organization were recruited to take their place. That change earned the hospital an A rating in patient safety from Leapfrog. And they are the only hospital in New York City to have that high a rating.
So, what is the key takeaway for a CEO in this situation?
Well, I think the biggest problem for many CEOs is being objective. Like all of us, they have their blinders on. They're hired to fulfill a strategy, make money for the investors, and so forth. And to do that, they often need objective third parties who can make them aware of the shifts going on in the marketplace and ensure they do the right thing to disrupt an organization that needs to be transformed. And that's more or less the role I'm playing for the CEO of this hospital.